There is a dangerous lie that has destroyed more lives than failure ever could. A lie so deeply rooted in society that most people never question it until it is too late. You were taught that if you were kind, patient, loyal, and understanding, the world would eventually reward you. You were told that goodness would protect you, that sincerity would attract respect, that sacrifice would create love. But look carefully at the lives of those who gave everything without limits. Most of them are exhausted, betrayed, forgotten, or silently resentful. The world praises good people while quietly consuming them. And that is the hidden truth Machiavelli understood long before modern society was built on appearances and emotional manipulation. He saw something most people refuse to accept. Goodness without power becomes weakness in the eyes of the world. Not because morality is meaningless, but because human nature respects strength before virtue. People admire kindness until it becomes predictable. Then they exploit it. The shocking cost of goodness is not simply pain. It is invisibility. It is becoming so available, so forgiving, so emotionally accessible that people stop seeing your value entirely. The more you tolerate disrespect, the more others convince themselves you deserve it. The more you sacrifice your peace to keep others comfortable, the more they assume your peace has no value. That is the cruel paradox of human behavior. What is easily available is rarely respected. Most people do not realize they are trapped inside this cycle until life breaks them. Until they give years of loyalty to people who disappear when they are no longer useful. Until they become the emotional support system for everyone else while nobody notices they are drowning themselves. Until they wake up one morning feeling emotionally drained, mentally exhausted, and strangely invisible in a world they tried so hard to please. That is the moment the illusion begins to crack. Machiavelli understood that power is not only political, it is psychological. It exists in relationships, friendships, workplaces, families, and even silence itself. The person who controls access controls value. The person who cannot walk away becomes controlled by those who can. This is why many genuinely good people suffer quietly. They confuse goodness with emotional surrender. They believe being needed is the same as being respected, but they are completely different things. Respect requires boundaries, and boundaries terrify people who benefited from your lack of them. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must choose between remaining harmless or becoming difficult to manipulate. That choice changes everything, because once you begin protecting your energy instead of constantly offering it, people react differently. Some call you cold, others say you changed, but what they truly mean is this: they no longer have unlimited access to you. That is what disturbs them, not your transformation, your unavailability. The truth is, many people never loved your soul. They loved your convenience. They loved the fact that you tolerated behavior others would reject. They loved that you answered every message, forgave every betrayal, explained every emotion, and remained emotionally predictable no matter how poorly they treated you. Your goodness made their lives easier while slowly destroying your own. And the terrifying part is that society often rewards this behavior in the beginning. People praise selflessness until it becomes self-destruction. They call you mature when you stay silent about disrespect. They call you kind when you overextend yourself for others. They call you humble when you constantly minimize your own needs. But eventually, all of it creates a dangerous imbalance. You become emotionally trained to prioritize everyone except yourself. That is not virtue. That is conditioning. Machiavelli knew that human beings are driven more by self-interest than morality. Most people do not evaluate you based on your intentions. They evaluate you based on your perceived strength. This is why two people can say the exact same words, yet one is respected while the other is ignored. One carries consequence, the other carries desperation. And desperation has a scent people unconsciously detect. You can see it everywhere. The person who fears losing others becomes controlled by them. The person who constantly seeks approval slowly loses their identity. The one who cannot say no becomes emotionally owned by everyone around them. This is why excessive goodness becomes dangerous. It removes the natural defenses necessary for survival in a world where many people operate through manipulation, hidden motives, and emotional opportunism. The harsh reality is that some people study your kindness the way predators study weakness. They observe how much disrespect you will tolerate before reacting. They test your emotional limits slowly, first through small dismissals, then through inconsistency, then through betrayal disguised as misunderstanding. And every time you remain available despite the damage, you silently teach them that losing you carries no consequence. That is why many good people are repeatedly hurt by the same type of individuals. Not because they are unlucky, because they never learned the language of power. Power is not cruelty. Power is the ability to protect your peace without guilt. Power is knowing when silence is more effective than explanation. It is understanding that not every battle deserves your emotional energy. It is realizing that constant forgiveness without accountability invites repeated disrespect. The strongest people are not always the loudest. Often they are the calmest, the most emotionally disciplined, the least reactive, the hardest to manipulate. That is the transformation most people fear. Because once a genuinely good person learns restraint, awareness, and boundaries, they become nearly impossible to control. And suddenly the same people who ignored their value begin noticing their absence. The same people who took them for granted begin feeling uncertain. The same people who benefited from endless access begin panicking when access disappears. Because scarcity creates value where availability destroyed it. Machiavelli understood something deeply uncomfortable about human psychology. People often appreciate what they fear losing more than what they permanently possess. This is why endless tolerance rarely creates respect. It creates complacency. The moment others become certain you will always stay, always forgive, and always return, they stop treating your presence like something valuable. They start treating it like air. And people only notice air when it disappears. Most people spend their entire lives trying to be accepted, never realizing acceptance can become a prison. The deeper your need to be liked, the easier you become to manipulate. You start adjusting your personality to avoid conflict. You tolerate behavior that quietly destroys your self-respect. You suppress your anger, your instincts, and your truth because you fear losing connection. But the moment your identity depends on external approval, your freedom disappears. That is the hidden cost nobody warns you about. Good people often believe their patience makes them strong. But patience without limits becomes permission. Every time someone disrespects you and faces no consequence, they unconsciously lower their perception of your value. Human beings are deeply responsive to behavioral patterns. People study what they can get away with. And when your forgiveness becomes predictable, your pain becomes irrelevant to them. This is why Machiavelli believed fear maintains order more effectively than affection alone. He was not glorifying cruelty. He was exposing reality. Affection without consequence creates entitlement. When people stop fearing your absence, they stop respecting your presence. Look carefully at modern relationships, friendships, and workplaces. The people who are always available are often appreciated the least. The ones who constantly sacrifice themselves become emotionally exhausted while others continue taking without guilt. Meanwhile, those who protect their time, enforce standards, and remain emotionally composed are treated with caution and respect. Because restraint creates psychological weight, the world reacts differently to people who can walk away. This is why emotionally disciplined individuals appear powerful even in silence. They do not chase validation. They do not beg to be understood. They do not over-explain every decision to avoid criticism. They understand something most people never learn: the more desperate you are to control how others see you, the less control you actually possess. True power begins the moment you stop negotiating your worth. Machiavelli understood that human nature is unstable. People are loyal when circumstances benefit them. They are supportive when your presence serves their emotional needs. But when your usefulness disappears, many relationships reveal their true foundation. This realization destroys illusions, but it also creates clarity. And clarity changes a person permanently. Once you recognize that not everyone deserves unlimited access to your energy, you begin moving differently. You become more observant, less reactive, less emotionally available to manipulation disguised as guilt. You stop confusing sympathy with loyalty. You stop mistaking attention for respect. Most importantly, you stop rewarding harmful behavior simply because you fear being alone. That is where transformation begins. The strongest people are not emotionally numb. They simply understand emotional discipline. They know uncontrolled empathy can become self-destruction. They know guilt is one of the most powerful tools manipulators use against kind-hearted individuals. The moment someone realizes you feel responsible for everyone's emotions, they gain psychological leverage over you. And many people use that leverage without hesitation. Some will weaponize disappointment to control you. Others will make you feel selfish for protecting your peace. Some will accuse you of changing the moment you stop tolerating disrespect. But what truly frustrates them is not your boundaries. It is the loss of control they once had over you. Because boundaries expose intentions. The people who genuinely value you will respect your limits. The people who benefited from your lack of limits will resent them. That difference reveals everything. Machiavelli believed that appearances shape human behavior more than intentions. This is why emotionally composed people command attention even when they say very little. Their silence creates uncertainty. Their restraint creates tension. And tension creates psychological influence. Most individuals reveal too much too quickly because they fear misunderstanding. But powerful people understand that mystery protects them. The less emotionally predictable you become, the harder you are to manipulate. This is why silence unsettles insecure people. Silence forces others to confront uncertainty without control. Many individuals talk excessively because they are uncomfortable with stillness. They rush to explain themselves because they crave validation. But every unnecessary explanation weakens psychological positioning. The more you defend yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, the more authority you surrender. Sometimes silence communicates strength more effectively than words ever could. And this is where most good people struggle. They believe explaining themselves will create fairness. They believe if they just communicate enough, love enough, sacrifice enough, people will eventually understand their value. But many people do not misunderstand you accidentally. They misunderstand you conveniently. Because misunderstanding benefits them. It allows them to avoid accountability while continuing to benefit from your emotional labor. That realization changes the way you see the world. You begin noticing how often kindness is exploited when it lacks boundaries. You begin seeing how manipulators search for emotionally generous people because generous people are easier to guilt, easier to pressure, and easier to emotionally exhaust. You realize that some individuals are not attracted to goodness itself. They are attracted to access. Unlimited access to your attention. Unlimited access to your patience. Unlimited access to your emotional energy. And once you understand this, you stop offering yourself so freely. Not because you became heartless. Because you became aware. Awareness is dangerous because it destroys illusions permanently. Once you see how emotional dependency weakens people, you cannot unsee it. You start recognizing how often society encourages self-sacrifice while ignoring self-preservation. You notice how many people wear exhaustion like a badge of honor while quietly losing themselves trying to save everyone else. But exhaustion is not proof of virtue. Sometimes it is proof you abandoned yourself too many times. Machiavelli understood that survival requires both intelligence and emotional control. The world does not always reward the most moral person. Often it rewards the most disciplined one. The individual capable of observing human nature without becoming emotionally consumed by it. The person who can remain calm while others react impulsively. The one who understands that emotional restraint creates strategic advantage. Because those who control their emotions are harder to control externally. That is why powerful individuals rarely reveal desperation. Even in pain, they maintain composure. Even in conflict, they choose precision over emotional chaos. They understand that emotional reactions can be used against them. Weakness is rarely exploited immediately. First it is studied. Then tested. Then gradually controlled. And many good people never realize they are being psychologically managed until they feel completely drained. By then, they no longer recognize themselves. There comes a moment in life when every person faces a brutal decision. Continue being who the world expects you to be, or become someone the world can no longer exploit. That moment rarely arrives peacefully. Usually it comes through betrayal, humiliation, abandonment, or emotional exhaustion. Pain becomes the teacher that kindness refused to listen to. And for many people, that lesson changes everything forever. Because eventually you realize that being endlessly available does not create love. It creates familiarity. And familiarity without respect becomes dangerous. The people who once admired your patience begin depending on it. The people who once appreciated your forgiveness begin expecting it. Slowly, your kindness stops feeling valuable because it no longer feels rare. This is why emotionally intelligent people eventually become more selective with their energy. They understand that attention is power. Time is power. Emotional access is power. And anything powerful must be protected. Not everyone deserves unrestricted access to your mind, your emotions, or your peace. Some people only enter your life to consume what you spent years building. Machiavelli understood this uncomfortable truth about human behavior. Most individuals operate through advantage, not loyalty. They stay close to what benefits them emotionally, socially, or strategically. That does not mean genuine people do not exist. They do. But truly loyal individuals are rare. And the mistake many good-hearted people make is assuming everyone values loyalty the same way they do. That assumption destroys them. Because while they are investing emotionally, others are calculating convenience. While they are protecting relationships, others are protecting self-interest. And when circumstances change, the emotionally dependent person suffers the most because their entire identity became attached to people who were never equally invested. This is why self-mastery matters more than external approval. The moment your peace depends on another person's behavior, you become psychologically vulnerable. Your emotions become reactive. Your confidence becomes unstable. Your sense of value rises and falls according to how others treat you. And that is an extremely dangerous way to live because human beings are inconsistent by nature. People change. Feelings change. Circumstances change. But disciplined individuals remain grounded within themselves. That is what makes them difficult to break. Machiavelli believed that those who cannot govern themselves will always be governed by others. Most people hear that and think about politics or leadership. But the deeper meaning is psychological. If your emotions constantly control your decisions, someone else will eventually learn how to control your emotions. And once someone controls your emotions, they control your behavior. That is why emotional discipline is one of the highest forms of power. Not because it removes humanity, but because it protects clarity. The strongest people are not those who never feel pain. They are the ones who refuse to let pain make their decisions for them. They observe betrayal without collapsing. They experience disappointment without losing themselves. They feel emotion deeply while still maintaining control over their actions. That level of self-command changes how the world responds to you. People sense when someone is emotionally dependent. They also sense when someone is internally grounded. One energy invites manipulation. The other creates caution. This is why emotionally disciplined individuals often appear intimidating without trying. Their calmness unsettles chaotic people. Their silence unsettles manipulators. Their boundaries unsettle those who relied on emotional access without accountability. Because controlled people are difficult to influence. And difficult to influence people naturally command respect. The shocking cost of goodness is not merely betrayal from others. The deeper cost is betraying yourself for too long. Ignoring your instincts. Suppressing your standards. Remaining loyal to situations that slowly destroy your mental peace. Many people spend years abandoning themselves just to avoid disappointing others. But eventually that self-abandonment creates resentment, emotional numbness, and internal exhaustion. Then one day they wake up and realize they built their entire identity around being useful instead of being fulfilled. That realization is painful. But it is also liberating. Because once you understand that your value does not increase through suffering, you stop glorifying emotional sacrifice. You stop believing that tolerating disrespect makes you mature. You stop confusing emotional endurance with emotional wisdom. And for the first time, you begin protecting yourself with the same intensity you once reserved only for others. That is when your entire energy changes. You stop chasing people who are comfortable losing you. You stop explaining your worth to those determined not to see it. You stop negotiating your boundaries to avoid conflict. And strangely, the moment you become less desperate for acceptance, people begin respecting you more. Because confidence creates psychological gravity. Machiavelli understood that the world often responds more strongly to perceived strength than visible goodness. Again, this does not mean cruelty is the answer. It means goodness without self-respect invites exploitation. The goal is not to become cold. The goal is to become conscious. Conscious of human nature. Conscious of manipulation. Conscious of your own emotional patterns and vulnerabilities. Awareness changes everything. Once you truly see the hidden dynamics behind relationships, power, and emotional dependency, you move through life differently. You become slower to trust but stronger internally. More compassionate but less naive. More disciplined with your energy. More intentional with your presence. You stop needing constant validation because your identity is no longer built on external approval. That is real freedom. Not controlling others. Controlling yourself. And perhaps that is the deepest truth hidden inside Machiavelli's philosophy. The world cannot easily manipulate a person who no longer fears loneliness, rejection, or disapproval. Once someone becomes emotionally self-sufficient, many common methods of control lose their power completely. Guilt loses power. Manipulation loses power. Emotional games lose power. Because the person finally understands their worth does not depend on constant acceptance from others. The world will always test people who are good-hearted. It will test their patience, their loyalty, and their emotional limits. Some will become bitter after those experiences. Others will become wiser. That choice determines everything. Do not lose your humanity. But never again abandon yourself in the name of being good. Because goodness without strength becomes sacrifice. And sacrifice without awareness becomes destruction. The strongest people are not the cruelest. They are the ones who learned how to protect their peace without apologizing for it.